All right, so we just finished up with invertebrates. And now we're moving on to vertebrates. So what exactly is a vertebrate? Alex?
Animal with a backbone.
Yeah, it's an animal, so we're still in the animal kingdom. Yeah. It's an animal that has a backbone, a spinal column, a spinal cord, okay, an internal skeleton. That's what a vertebrate is. In your body, do you know what these bones that make up your spine are called? They're your vertebrae. They're a series of bones stacked one on top of the other. And here's an example of this is what vertebrae look like. What is this thing running down the middle? That's the spinal cord. So the vertebrae themselves are bones. These are bones. This tunnel that runs through each of those bones, okay, has inside of it the spinal cord. The spinal cord is nerve tissue. It's the nerve tissue that takes information from your brain, sends it down to the various parts of your body, and sends information up to your brain. Okay? So vertebrates have these bones. They have the spinal cord. So let's, as we've been doing, what domain are we in? When we're talking about vertebrates. No, it's not a domain. Eukarya. What kingdom? Animal. Now the phylum, I did mention it back when we talked about taxonomy, but the phylum where all vertebrates are placed is called chordates. Think about it like a spinal cord. Chordates. That's because all of these organisms have a spinal cord. And they also have not an exoskeleton. Any guess what you would, so where is the skeleton of a vertebrate?
On the outside.
On the outside? Your skeleton's on the outside?
Oh,
No, it's in the inside.
Inside.
internal stuff.
So in arthropods we called it an exoskeleton. In vertebrates we would call it an endoskeleton, an internal skeleton. Endo is the opposite of exo. We will talk about 5 different classes of vertebrates. You guys just named them. Is this?
Fish.
Fish?
Frog.
Yes, so that can be amphibian,
Snake.
reptile.
Bird. Mammal.
Yep. So those are classes: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. We'll take them one at a time. That's also the order of evolution as well. The first vertebrates that evolved on the earth were fish. They evolved into amphibians and so on. So when we talk about fish, really there's 3 classes of fish. They're not all one class. We won't really get into these details. It was kind of interesting to talk about. This kind of fish.
Oh, that's that vampire.
So this is super scary fish, I think. Okay, that's its mouth. Has almost like a suction cup kind of mouth. It has these circular ridges of very sharp teeth. Its tongue, when it comes out, has teeth on it. It almost looks like a drill. This is a fish called a lamprey. It's one of the jawless fish.
Oh.
I have lots of stories about fish because in college, one of the classes I take was ichthyology, the study of fish. I think I probably mentioned it before. But I have some experience with some of these. For example, the lamprey. On this class, one of the things we had to do was go out, I went to school in Vermont on Lake Champlain, and in a big like fishing boat. Like one of those kind of boats where they you put the nets in the water, haul them in, and you spill the fish on the deck, and you can look at all the fish, and it's a research boat. And anyway, when we did this, we hauled in the fish, and we were looking at them and so forth, and we found some of these lamprey. And so they're long, or maybe, they can vary in size, but the ones we found were about this long. They look a lot like an eel. So they're very thin, they almost look like a snake body. Okay? The end of their mouth is like a suction cup. Okay? And they have these rows of teeth. And so, like, my professor's wearing like this rubber apron, and he took the lamprey and like put it on there and like sucks on right away, and it's pretty hard to like remove it. What these fish do is they're parasites. They find like big fish and they attach to the side of them. They basically use their tongue to drill a hole into the side of the fish, and then as that fish is bleeding and so forth, that's what they use as their food.
Why would they have the teeth then?
The teeth are to like sort of latch on and then drill into the fish. And also when we were looking at these fish on the ship, on the boat, the big fish we found some big lake trout that were like this big, but in some of them you could see the wound in the side of them where they once had a lamprey attached to them. And in some the wound had healed. In others we found lampreys still attached to the fish. And so they find big fish. They live in freshwater lakes, rivers, things like that, streams. And so there's also another type of jawless fish called the hagfish, but those are the ones I've seen before, the lamprey. Alex?
Were those the ones in the video when we watched it, like when they, like all the starfish and things, feeding on the SCI7?
No, I don't think so. Those are, I think, eels.
Like, do they test humans?
I mean, they might, like, if you were in the water and it happened to find you, but you would know immediately, you would, like, freak out and grab it and take it off. So it wouldn't, like, it might try, but it would never stay. It never attached like it would.
Feel it?
Oh yeah, they could probably feel it, but they can't. They're really. What can they do, right? They don't have any. They can't pull it off or anything. So there's sort of not much they can do.
My grandpa was swimming in the water. I think it was Lake George. They're in the lakes, right?
Yeah, they're nice.
I think he went to Lake George, I'm pretty sure, and he was swimming in the water and he got attacked by like 3 of those.
Really,
Yeah.
Alex?
But in the video it said that, like, worms, it said that they were some sort of worms.
Oh yeah, these are not worms. These are fish. So yeah, those things going in the seal, and as it was that dead seal, yeah, those were a bunch of different worms in different invertebrates. There's another group that are cartilaginous fish. Cartilaginous. What do you think that might mean?
Gills?
Look like another word you've heard before?
Cartilage.
Cartilage. These fish have a skeleton that's actually not made of hard calcium infused bone, but of cartilage. You know, cartilage is what your ears are made out of and what your nose is made out of. It's a type of connective tissue. It's soft. It still has structure, right? But it's sort of flexible. They have their whole skeleton made out of cartilage rather than bone. And the sharks are like that. Rays, skates, those are cartilaginous fish. And then the last group, the one you're probably most familiar with, are the bony fish. This is the biggest group, which includes, trout and salmon and bass and things we're probably familiar with. What's that?
It's a shark.
This is what type of fish? It's a hammerhead shark, a cartilaginous fish.
No, who's the guy on it?
That's a guy, so this is a picture I took, or actually my dad took. So I was on this boat, and the story is, I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and we were in Florida on vacation. My dad decided, I was never like big into fishing, but my dad decided to take me on this deep sea fishing boat. That's this boat here. And so we went on the boat, and they take you out. Has anyone ever done this?
Yeah.
Gone out in the ocean like fishing? So it's all right. I don't love the fish, but anyway, they have big poles. You put them in the water and try and catch fish and so forth. And so we were doing that. I don't think we caught anything. But then part of the thing they did on this boat was they would have like a little drawing, and one of the groups that were on the boat, if they won this drawing, they would get to fish with live bait, like these big fish like this big. And obviously for fishing with bigger fish like that, you can catch a bigger fish. That's why it's like, good to win that prize. So anyway, we won it. My dad and I won this. We got to fish with this live bait. So they, the crew members, like this guy was one of the crew members. They put it on the line for us, and we're fishing with it. All of a sudden, we caught something. Right? They have bigger poles for this live bait, and so the pole's like bending like you see in TV, and so we're trying to reel it in, we can't hardly do anything. So the crew members come over, they're helping us, and they're bringing this thing in, and so we kind of realize like it's something pretty big, okay? And you know, so they're working at it, reeling it in over time. And finally, they reel it in, and they get it like right to the side of the boat. Okay, this is while we're in the ocean. And so I'm just like 7 or 8 years old or whatever, and I look over and there's a shark in the water. We had caught a shark, and it was this hammerhead shark. And so it's a little scary, but I got even more scared because then to get it in the boat, like you can't like, you're catching a little you know, sunfish and you reel it in and dangling there, right? You have to somehow get this, it's pretty big, it's like 5 feet long. You have to somehow get it in the boat. So the crew member, they reel it in and they keep it next to the side of the boat, and then a couple of them go off to some little area and they come back and they have these giant poles with like sharp hooks at the edge of them. And so they have to get the fish on the boat, they have to like lean over the edge and they take these big, it's almost like a rake but with just a single hook, and they jab the hook into the side of the shark, 2 of them at the same time, and then they use those to like get the thing over the rail and onto the deck of the ship. So that doesn't kill it, right? It's still alive, but now it's just really mad. So now I'm kind of really freaking out because there's a hammerhead shark right next to me on the boat, and it's like flopping around on the deck of the boat. I'm sort of running away crying, and the hammerhead's flopping around trying to eat me. And so then the final part, what do they have to do next? Yeah, somehow kill it. So I don't know how they're going to kill this hammerhead shark that's chasing me down the deck of the boat. They go into their little closet, and next they bring out baseball bats. And so then the crew members just start smashing the thing with baseball bats in the head until it finally dies, stops chasing me, and that's the end of the story. So they kill it and keep it. It was in this little bin here. That's where they put it after we caught it. Because there's like all bloody and disgusting. So then we finish, right? I'm like traumatized. And so we finally get back to this area, the dock where we had, and they're like, okay, well, do you want your hammerhead shark that you caught? And I'm like, I don't know, what are we going to do with a shark? And we said, no, I don't really want this thing. And so I think they were going to, I don't know, one of these, I think this guy maybe is who took it. And we took a picture. You could see the mouth there. You could see the eyes on each side of it. I don't know what you do. You kind of eat shark, I guess.
Yeah, I would have took the jaws and then hung it up in like the
Like mount it? Like you think I should have had it right here?
Yeah.
Or maybe back there would be a good spot for the hammerhead shark that attacked me on the boat.
Mr. Girls, why
Yeah.
weren't you in the picture?
I was gonna say.
I don't know.
where
I
are
was
you in
too
this
scared. I don't
picture?
want to go near that
Or
thing
your
anymore.
dad.
What?
Or your dad.
I don't know. He was probably scared too.
That is
This is a
nice
traumatic
picture.
experience, I know. Yeah, that's not my dad. That's some random guy from the boat. John?
What year was that?
Like I said, I was 7 or 8, so it was probably in the early 1980s.
Oh, wow.
So what lake was that?
It was in the ocean. It was in the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh,
Yeah. All right, so there's my story about being attacked by hammerhead shark.
So you have caught a shark before, wow.
No, yeah,
Everybody
I've
can
caught a
say that.
shark, yeah. All right, so let's talk about some of the adaptations. So fish, obviously, they're adapted, have evolved to life in the water. Okay, fish evolved in the water from invertebrate animals. And so they have a lot of adaptations that allow them to be successful. And so they have a body covered in scales. How many people have held a fish before? Like out of a lake or something? Yeah. How many people like go fishing and like, okay. So if you ever held a fish, you know that they have scales that if you rub your hand along the side of a fish, you know, one way it will be sort of smooth. If you go the other way, it's very rough. Okay, that's because their scales kind of all overlap one another, like sort of shingles on a roof. And they have also mucus. You know, if you ever picked up a fish, you know, it's kind of slimy and it's hard to hold and they're slippery. That's because they have this layer of mucus that's secreted outside of their body. Helps to protect against like parasites, helps them move through the water easily. You can see here the individual scales in the fish. And some fish have very big scales that are, you know, quite visible. Others have really, really tiny scales that you can almost not see. we're gonna talk about, for each type of vertebrate, their body temperature. Different types of vertebrates have different adaptations in terms of their body temperature. Fish are what we call cold-blooded, sometimes called ectothermic. Now, it's not a great term because it doesn't actually mean their blood is cold. Do you know what it means if an animal is cold-blooded, John?
More back to the cold-blooded?
No, not quite. They could live in warm or cold, but that would make sense based on the name, but it's not that. Gianna?
They have to use the sun to keep themselves up, and they can't do it by themselves.
Yes, they don't regulate their body temperature internally. Okay. Basically, their body temperature fluctuates with their surroundings. Right now, in Oneida Lake, just frozen over, the water underneath the ice is probably, 38, 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The fish living there, their body temperatures are the same. Their body as the lake warms up in the spring, the fish's body temperature will rise. Okay? And so they don't regulate it themselves. Now, a human, on the other hand, is warm-blooded. Mammals are warm-blooded. We control our body temperature internally and keep it at a consistent rate. Cold-blooded animals, their body temperature depends on their surroundings. So that's what the difference is. Fish are cold-blooded generally. Another thing we'll talk about with each type of animal is their reproduction. Because in vertebrates, fertilization of the egg, so fertilization is when sperm cells from the male fertilize egg cells from the female. And in fish, that happens outside of the body. We call that external fertilization. When fish reproduce, okay, you know what we call it when fish are releasing their eggs? There's a term you may have heard if you're into fishing. Hatching is after this happened.
Oh,
It's called spawning. Have you ever heard of spawning? So a female fish, during usually the springtime around here, will go and release thousands of eggs. Some fish can release hundreds of thousands. These are unfertilized eggs. She releases them into the water, and then at the same time, the male fish releases sperm cells also into the water. And some of those sperm cells fertilize some of those egg cells. So, but that happens outside of the body. That's external fertilization. The eggs that are fertilized then can start to grow, and the embryo inside the egg can develop and eventually hatch. But that also happens outside of the body. As we move along and talk about the other classes of vertebrates, we're going to see that's not true of all vertebrates. Some have internal fertilization. Some have internal development as well. But fish, fertilization happens outside, externally, and the young develop outside. Now, why do you think fish would lay thousands, tens of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of eggs? Do they all grow into fish?
No.
Christian, why not?
Because they're not all getting fertilized, so they want to make sure there is at least a couple getting fertilized.
Yes, so not all of them will get fertilized. A percentage will get fertilized. Even out of those, only a certain percentage will develop into young. Many will be eaten, okay? Many won't have enough oxygen and so forth, or might just wash away. So, because only a small percentage will eventually hatch, they have to release lots and lots of eggs to be sure the species can continue. Christian?
Oh, what if another different kind of fish fertilizes?
Doesn't work. It has to be the same species of fish. Like a brown trout can only fertilize, male brown trout can only fertilize a female brown trout. No.
And how would the male produce the eggs if they're not fertilized? Like if they're not, how does she make them?
They just are made internally. She has ovaries inside that make all the eggs. The male has testes inside which makes all the sperm cells, and then they just release them. So fish have some other adaptations. Many fish have something we call counter shading. This is common in animals that live in the water and also that live in the air. Counter shading is when the top half of the animal is darker in color than the underside, which is lighter in color. Do you know how this might be a helpful adaptation? Alex?
Because, well, actually, no. Maybe it's like better camouflage or something.
It is, like, but why two colors? That's kind of strange, right?
Maybe it's hard to see it from the top, from like a bird or something.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So dark on the top means any predator from above, like a fish or maybe a bird, looking sees the dark top surface, which would be against like the bottom of the lake or the stream, which would probably also be dark. So it would blend in. At the same time, why light on the bottom? Yeah, so a predator below, looking to find prey above it, would see the light underside against sort of the sky, the sun that's at the above the water surface. And so it blends in both from the bottom and the top. Like here you see some examples of counter shading. This is not a fish. What is this? Which is?
A mammal. A bird. Sorry.
A bird. That's a bird. So it provides camouflage from both above and below. Alex?
Couldn't it also, if they wanted to regulate their body heat, like if they wanted to soften the water?
Maybe that's a good idea, because dark absorbs more heat. Fish have another part you may not have noticed. It's called the lateral line. Can you see the lateral line in this fish? Yeah, it's right around here. This is actually a sense organ for the fish. I don't know if you've ever been like in a lake or somewhere trying to catch some fish in a net. How easy is it?
No, that's
Really hard, right? Yeah, so this sense organ called the lateral line is used to sense vibrations in the water. So as soon as you put that net near the fish, it senses the vibration of that coming into the water and can get away pretty quickly. It's also one of the ways that, have you seen huge groups of fish swimming in schools and they're all coordinated? Part of that is because they can sense each other's position through that part called the lateral line.
Wait, could you go back?
Yep. Bless you. So we know fish live in the water. They still need oxygen though. How do they get that oxygen? Through their gills. Gills are an adaptation organ that allows animals to get oxygen from the water. There is oxygen dissolved in the water. But in order to get that oxygen out, special organs are needed. We call those gills. They take in oxygen, they release carbon dioxide. And the gills, the way it works in fish is they take water in through their mouth, okay, and then it passes over their gills, which are sort of on each side of their mouth. And then there's an opening, and that water then passes across the gills. Along the way, the gills absorb the oxygen from the water, release the carbon dioxide. Here you can see there's a covering over them usually. Like if you look at a fish, you don't see the gills. They have a covering, it's called the operculum. But if you lift that operculum up like they're doing in this picture, this guy's lifting it up a little bit, these are the gills. See, they're very bright red, okay, because they're filled with oxygen-rich blood. They're very fine and delicate. That's why if you take a fish out of the water, they all kind of collapse because the water is not supporting these very thin, very fine gills, and the fish can't breathe out of the water. Also, like if you do go fishing and you catch fish and you're trying to keep them for later, they have those little like hooks, and they goes in through the mouth and then out through like their gill slit, and then that's going through that area there. And so that's how fish get oxygen from the water. Fish also have a part that's called the swim bladder. The swim bladder is this organ that can be inflated with air or deflated. And that allows the fish to regulate what we call its buoyancy, or how it floats in the water. Like, did you ever have a beach ball? You try and hold it under the water in the pool? It's really hard, right? Pops up, smacks you in the face and stuff. So when you inflate something like that, it allows the fish to float really high in the water. And if it forces the air out of the swim bladder, then it can sink lower in the water. It's kind of like if you imagine trying to like float in a pool. If you take a really deep breath in a pool and hold that breath and float, it's really easy to float. But what happens when you exhale that air? Hey, you start to sink. The same sort of thing happens in the fish. It can inflate the swim bladder or deflate it, controlling how it floats in the water.
So like when they die, that's how they
Yeah, and another story about my college fish class. In the same time when we were on the fishing boat, there were, when we hauled the fish up, we put the nets pretty deep in the water. We hauled them up, and many of the fish we saw were dead, and their mouths were forced open, and they had a little bubble that seemed to be like poking out of their mouth. Okay? What had happened was we brought the fish to the surface too quickly, because these fish that we got from 75 feet under the water, if you swim to the bottom of a 10 feet deep swimming pool, how's it feel on your eardrum?
Pressure.
Ton of pressure, right? And that's only 10 feet or whatever. Imagine 75 feet underwater. There's immense pressure from all this water pushing down. And so these fish that were 75 feet underwater, that pressure was keeping their swim bladder small. But we brought them to the surface so fast that as the pressure decreased, their swim bladder was swelling. And it was swelling, so we brought them up so fast they couldn't release that air. And so it had basically swelled up, probably crushed their internal organs, and was poking out of their mouth, their swim bladder, and they had died from that. So that was not good. Fish have two chambered hearts. Do you know what humans have and other mammals? We have one heart, but how many chambers? I don't know if you ever learned this. Ava? We have 4 chambered hearts. Fish have 2. We're going to talk about that as we go through these different groups. Oh, there's the fish. That's an example. That's the fish's swim bladder sticking out of its mouth. Again, this is a fish that got brought to the surface too quickly.
Is that actually one?
Air would come out.
Do you guys end up eating them?
No.
Wait, is that like the actual?
That's it. Yeah.
That's
It's an organ.
Yeah, that's an organ. It's like a little balloon inside of the fish. Yeah, just swelled up. Oh, another interesting thing I got to do. I know, I like talking to my college classes. You know what this guy's doing? I didn't do this in college, several courses.
Spearfish.
No. He's electrofishing.
Oh, you put electricity in the water.
So this is a generator in a backpack, okay? And he's holding these 2 rods. When you press the buttons of these 2 rods, it sends an electrical current through the water, and it knocks animals in the water unconscious, and then they all float to the surface. And this woman would be she'd scoop up those fish, put them in the bucket, and then you could study them. You can't go fishing like to catch food to eat. This is only used for research, but it's kind of neat because you walk through the water with this backpack and you sort of move these rods around, and all the fish just sort of float to the
They
surface.
have like boats that do it. They have like these big things that come down.
Oh, really?
Why would you eat the fish when it's like?
Nothing. I mean, you just can't. It's illegal to do. You'll only use this for like research. And you have to be careful because every once in a while, like a person might reach in the water if you have the electrodes turned on and someone reaches in the water, they get shocked. Not like to kill them, but you can feel it. You have to wear rubber waders, otherwise you'd shock yourself as you're walking. All right, let's just last slide. Are there 2 slides left? I guess we'll finish the anatomy slides tomorrow. I'm gonna rush through it right now. I had a lot of stories today I didn't get finished, so sorry.